This week on Open Heart, I sit down with Sam Proper, a Cath Lab technologist turned award-winning entrepreneur and one of Open Heart's very first sponsors. After noticing a major gap in cardiac education, Sam founded Don't Miss a Beat, creating hands-on manuals and training tools to empower healthcare teams around the world. What started as a side project actually became a nationally recognized platform that now also supports causes close to her heart. In this episode, we talk about perseverance in a system that often tells you that you can't, and what happens when we choose to keep going anyway. This is a story of heart, grit, and purpose, and a reminder that creativity and compassion can transform medicine from the inside out. And it can start with a single person. Welcome, Sam. Let's get into it. Yeah, welcome, Sam Proper, to Open Heart.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
Good, because we did our pre-meditation.
We did do a pre-meditation. And I am so excited to have you here today because I've been following your journey for so many years. And I feel creepy saying that because I have actually
I've
been
done the same. It's
following
mutual.
you. And I'm amazed by how much you're able to do. You are a Cath Lab technologist. You are an educator. I had no idea that you were also a part of industry at some point. You now have a creative entrepreneurial company in which you do medical education. What have you not done?
When you say it like that, it sounds like a lot, but all of it's very, at the time, very aligned with where I was, that it didn't feel like pivots, but they are all pivots.
I love that you call them pivots because I also can very much relate to this idea that life happens in the way that it needs to. And every single thing kind of prepares you for the next thing, prepares you for the next thing, but we don't always know what that big thing is.
Not at all. None of it was planned. This wasn't my plan.
So how did you know that you were on the right track as you kind of went through these different steps of your journey?
We talk about alignment, and I feel like that doesn't come immediately. Immediately, it feels wildly uncomfortable, wildly against, if anybody asks about me, I'm very logical and practical. I'm a planner, and pivoting is not part of that repertoire. However, I've done it 4 or 5 times. That now I realize when something feels very, very uncomfortable, but I can't stop thinking about it, and it's just in my chest and on my mind, and things I have nightmares or dreams about, that it's something I'm supposed to gravitate toward, or at least explore, entertain it and kind of see what happens. And then life has a funny way of, my dad always says, like, slapping me in the face so that I can't take a different direction. Like, I have to go that way, because I would never leave a team or my students or my business if I love it. That something really bananas has to happen to kind of catapult me the other way, even though the signs have always been there. Like, life has a funny way of eventually pushing me into that direction of discomfort and just going, well, you're going to do this now. I'm like, okay, thank you. I'm listening. And then I just try and go for it. And then I realize, wow, I'm very happy. This is very aligned. I feel very relaxed. I love doing this. And why was this never on my list before? But you don't know what you don't
I love
know.
hearing somebody with a Cath Lab background talk about personal alignment. When have you ever had a conversation with somebody in the control room of a Cath Lab about anything like this, right? Because I think what happens in medicine is we're kind of put into a box. We're like, this is my role, this is what I do. And oftentimes when we deviate from that normal, people are very well intentioned, but they give you a lot of advice about how things won't work, right? A lot of it is based in control, fear of the unknown, a lot of the different anxieties that people have from their own life and experience. How did you navigate going from industry, Cath Lab, now to building this beautiful business of yours that helps so many people? How did you know that this was the right path? And how did you deal with those thoughts whenever they came from other people?
I heard it a lot, right? And if you have your own insecurities and then someone verbalizes that insecurity, it makes it a little more real, because you're like, oh, I thought those were just my internal doubts, but now you're articulating them, and you're either going to listen to them or be like, oh, I'm going to do this despite what people say. And all of the choices I made, at first, there were always stark disagreeers. Like, even when I chose this career field, it was an AS degree at a community college. And I left a 4-year university degree in the middle of getting that to go and pursue this career field. My parents didn't understand. They didn't support me. None of my friends understood, because trade schools weren't really a thing. State colleges weren't really a thing at the time, the way that they are now. And I knew what I was doing. but nobody else understood. And nobody knew what the Cath Lab was. Trying to explain what that career field is. They're like, okay, go get your little 2-year degree. And I'm like, I will, thanks.
How do you explain the Cath Lab to people? Because I think a lot of our listeners have probably never experienced that.
Yeah, to layman people, I say, if you know somebody who's had a heart attack, or you know somebody who's needed a pacemaker or a replacement of their valve, I do that with the physician. And they get that because they either have had it themselves or they know somebody who has had it. And I say, think of, like the Grey's Anatomy assistants to those attendings, right? In the OR, we're kind of like that, except it's much more a team environment. You're contributing to the case and expected to speak up. It is very different from the OR in that way. And it's not for everybody, but like it's very hands-on, very fun, very innovative. And if that's who you are, then it's for you.
I love that you mentioned the concept of a team in the Cath Lab, because for me, that is why I picked Cath Lab. It's why I love the job. It's why I love the community aspect of it, because we are working together. You cannot do this job alone. And we were just talking about how our energies just harmonize. Like whenever we're doing a case, it doesn't matter what time of day it is. It doesn't matter what's going on in the outside world. When we show up in that room together, we're like on it together. But I do think it's very reciprocal. So your contributions at the table are super important, as are mine. I think it's very much a dialogue of what are we going to do next? How do we work harmoniously together? And the ideas don't necessarily always come from the physician, right? It's always a conversation about what's next. And what are your experiences in the Cath Lab from that perspective?
I think everybody comes with different experiences. And to be honest, when I first started, we had a fellowship program where I was, and I did not understand the breadth or lack thereof of certain programs of a fellowship program, who gets exposure and hands-on and who doesn't. Like I saw a lot of fellows getting kicked off the table, and I'm like, where else are they supposed to learn? And I asked, do you like have class? And their program didn't. And they said, no, like this is our experience. And I was like, so if they're not letting you do anything, how are you supposed to learn? And it's the exact same when I was in school and clinical. Like if my preceptor just constantly takes over for me, I'm never going to learn. So I think I built a lot of empathy and understanding that way. And then at the same time, realizing I've worked with over 40 physicians. So I do have experience to contribute because I've seen people do things different ways. And you, as a physician, outside of your training, you don't always have that experience to go sit in and watch other people's cases and learn how other people do things. You're kind of eventually get a little siloed into your single experience of your own procedures. And so I was always comfortable contributing. I had physicians who were open to that conversation, and I would learn from them. If they had a choice I hadn't seen before, I'm like, oh, interesting. Why did you choose to do that? But I always led with a curiosity, not a judgment. I'm like, I'm sincerely asking so I can learn and support you.
I feel like that's such a valuable lesson for anyone who's at a Cath Lab table. It's lead with curiosity and with the intention of doing the right thing for the patient in front of you, and everything else is secondary, right? And I feel I kind of feel lucky right now because I get to ask, a person coming from your vantage point questions, because we rarely pause to ask people questions about how does it feel to be a tech at the table, and what kind of experiences have you had that have made you think like, man, we should be doing things differently?
Yeah. I came from a large lab, and thankfully I've been able to speak to people all over the world with different experiences, right? Like my experience is not just my own. What I'm speaking from is also stories that I've heard from other people. But there is a lot of healthcare as a business, and I didn't come into it understanding that, right? I was trained to be a patient advocate. My teachers taught me that. In my heart of hearts, I'm a relentless patient
I
advocate
also
to a
think it's just who
fault.
you are. You're a very
Yeah,
value-driven person, and you have deep integrity, which we were talking about how it makes life harder, but it's actually going to put you on your path toward alignment.
right. And it's unfortunately some labs are really great at maintaining that, right? From the leadership on the physician side all the way down to staff. And you can tell, like you just watch one case and you can tell if they're leading with integrity, if they're leading with patient advocacy, and you can tell when they're not. When sometimes you have a physician who's not open to feedback. You have trained, experienced techs who see it as and sometimes it is just a clock in, clock out. This is my paycheck. This isn't my calling. and you can feel it and see it in their decision making. And
And I
it
wonder if
just,
some of it is that people numb out whenever they feel like they don't have a voice. They feel like the only thing they can do to survive is to just become numb. And I can totally relate to that in certain contexts throughout my medical training.
yeah. And it happens if that's your only experience and you don't know. I see it a lot from people who have only ever worked at one hospital. If you haven't even seen that it's an option to not be like that, or what great patient care looks like, or what discussion and pivoting your decision from, I don't care if it's a student in the room who suggested something but saw it somewhere this one time and you're like, you know what? Yeah, let's try that because we're not getting anywhere right now. To have that ego left at the door is something that you might not recognize if you haven't actually experienced it, or you haven't ever been given the opportunity to be heard, right? And I see it from even physician to physician, right? Peer to peer, of those who I know are fantastic clinicians and who have great ideas that are afraid to speak up in the room with a certain physician. And I'm like, wow, you're even hurting your own practice. Yeah. You know, if you're not open to those types of things and just creating that culture and that open feedback. It's the same when you're an educator, right? It's the same when you're in my position. If I'm not open to feedback, I'm never going to grow. And the quality that I can provide, patients, if I was working in the lab, or to students or to people that I'm training, is just going to decline over time because everything's going to outgrow you.
I think that's such wise way of looking at life, looking at the Cath Lab, looking at becoming an educator. And something that comes to mind when you're speaking about these things is how, I love training people. I love teaching. I love learning. And one of my favorite things in the Cath Lab has been that aha moment when a trainee just gets it. It's like all of a sudden they did their first, wire down a coronary, or they got access for the first time. And what I've noticed is that when you can create an environment that feels safe, you can create a safe container for this person to function, they will oftentimes far exceed their own expectations and your expectations. And the goal of the teacher is to ensure that the student becomes the master who then exceeds what we've been able to do. And I really think that starts with that mentality that you're talking about. It's curiosity. It's about creating safety. And I'm curious about how you went from Cath Lab to becoming an educator.
I say voluntold. No one can make me do anything, but I accepted the challenge. I had just graduated, actually, and from that program, and I had been out for a semester, I guess a couple of months, and they needed somebody to do lab course. My dad was a teacher in high school, and I always said, I don't want to be an educator. Like, I was like, I don't have the patience, I don't have the empathy, and I'm still working on those things, but I never felt like I had the knowledge or capacity to do that. And again, life pulls you in funny ways. And my director said, yeah, I can give you every Wednesday off to go teach because we hire those students and it would be great for you to be able to go and contribute. I'm like, I wish you didn't make that happen and you just said no. But sure, I'll go. And that day of the week, every week, even though I loved the Cath Lab and I loved what I did, it never felt like work. I always looked forward to going. It was my favorite day of the week. I had that feeling finally of training somebody and you seeing them just flourish and get it and be like, thank you so much for just giving me a space to fail, and be okay with that and just let me figure it out, not trying to take over. And I loved it. And then I kept taking on more courses and more courses and more courses. And eventually a full-time position opened. And it was during COVID. And I said, I think it's my time to exit the lab and do this full-time because it's my favorite part of my week and my day, that I think this is where I'm supposed to be, even though I totally don't know what I'm doing all of the time. I'm not saying I'm the best educator. I know everything, but I'll figure it out.
So you follow that feeling, the gut feeling of I'm in the right place. Yeah. What does that feel like in your body? I'm probably never, I don't know if anyone's ever asked you that.
No, I find I recognize conflict really well. And I was starting to feel conflict at work with some of the decisions and some of the patient care. And I was getting so frustrated of skipping steps, right? And preventable complications I know it happens, but when it happens on a certain scale, it's just, I'm like, why can't I do anything about this? I feel like
moral
I can't
injury that comes with feeling helpless when you see that there is a place where you can help improve things.
Yes. And then I saw the students going out, we were hiring them, being patient advocates, speaking up early so that we were avoiding some of those complications. And I said, okay, I think this is where I'm supposed to be. And then that's how I can impact the field, right? Is changing it from their first day, and then they become the preceptors for the next generation. And I felt I was laughing all of the time. I was spending all of my free time at home, just like a creative space. So I was like,
Do you
okay, I'm
feel
going to
like
answer these messages.
expansive and joyful? I mean, the
Yeah,
work is always going to be hard, right? It takes effort, it takes energy, but if it helps you feel that sense of lightness or expansion, I feel like that's a yes, right? And I personally, like, in my journey, like listening to you, it's so relatable. And it's so crazy to me that I was watching your journey from afar without really knowing any of the background, but it's so relatable on so many levels. And for me, it was a matter of listening to that inner knowing, but I fought it for a really long time. And it was funny when you mentioned about your dad, the quiet whisper was always there, and it was like slight nudges. And then over time, it became like a big kick in the butt and was like, you got to do something differently. And so I think we all have that inner knowing, but we don't really talk about that in
it's hard to
the medical
articulate
environment.
what it is.
Yeah.
And you don't know how other people think and feel. Are they happy in this job? Do they feel like they're contributing and providing value? How's their home life? Like, they might be great at work, but are they having any balance? Are they dealing with a lot here, compartmentalizing it, and then projecting it onto people at home? I started seeing that a lot with students, and I don't think I really realized it until it was in the student environment where, they would have a, something happen at clinical and come and cry or send me this long message on Canvas, and maybe they recently lost somebody or they have never gotten negative feedback like that and don't know how to deal with it. I was like, we don't talk about this at work because we have a job and an outcome and we don't have time. You have one-on-one time sometimes, but I think we deal with such heavy things that 90% of it is comedic relief. And that's kind of what we spend our focus on. We don't want to bring people's moods down and kind of talk about that stuff. And I did with friends one-on-one. Like, I have people who have gone to that are working in the lab, and nurses and techs who have gone to illustration classes, who have a small business, who went to esthetician school, who go to acting classes, who make, cosplays. And they're like, I'm just working here so financially I can do my stuff for cosplay. And I would have never known that, but I think it's something that needs to be talked about a little more, because it's okay to love what you do and still feel like you want to try other things and develop who else you are as a person, because you just show up so much better, for your patients who are human beings, and hope that you have a personality and have other things that you're
Okay,
doing.
so that's everything I needed to hear today. So thank you for saying that. And I really think it's going to help a lot of people in our field to hear that. I do believe, and I've gotten more into this philosophy of life and this deeper connection of like what drives us, how do we show up in the world? And the thing that I keep coming back to is if your heart is pulled towards something and it's coming from a place of love and genuine curiosity and openness, it is something to explore, and without judgment, without fear, without control, all the different things. And as I've kind of aligned with that path of my own inner pull and knowing, life just unfolds in a really cool way. It's like you don't even have to go searching for something to fall into place.
It's literally knocking at your door,
Yeah.
screaming at you.
Where does that come from? And also, like, tying that back to clinical intuition. So when we're at the
Right.
table, there's a patient that's going through this really big experience. We're working quickly to open an occluded artery, which caused a heart attack. How do we know, beyond our medical textbooks, beyond the science, when we get that gut feeling that something is going to happen? How do we get that? Like, where does that even come from?
Life experience first. Like, I think if you ignore it already in your everyday life, you're also shutting it out clinically, right? And as I became more creative and as I started teaching and thinking outside of the box and allowing my students to teach and think outside of the box, I had so many more solutions and creativity and gut checks in work, in clinic.
That
And
is so cool. So
but
creativity heightened
they're
your
the
intuition.
same, aren't they?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter the environment you're in. It's like a soft skill almost. It's applicable across everything. So you can pick and choose where you're going to use it, but if you don't use it at all in other spaces, why do you think you're going to have it in this one? You can't be selective like that. It kind of has to come from leading with integrity, from being open, and it will just naturally come in your practice as well.
And is that how you trusted this concept of creating your Cath Lab manual to start?
Kind of. So that was interesting because that, again, Not my plan, not my intention. I did get my MBA, but I wasn't start a business.
But that's what I mean. Like, what have you not done?
I know. Well, I'm very big now on like answering callings and exploring things because it's done so many great things in my life. And people ask me like, well, what degree do I get? Do I go to something, for cardiology or for medicine? And I'm big on diversifying yourself. And I'm like, you can get 10 degrees in medicine, but it's all kind of rooted in the same thing. Like, why don't you go try different things and see if you like it? Because you don't know, and you can have it and never use it, but you learn something new and you did figure out if it's part of you or not. Like my Shauna, who runs my Don't Miss the Hiss page, she went and got her Juris Master's. She's not using it for anything, but it's something she was really passionate about, and she wanted to learn about malpractice and all of that. And she was like, I learned so much. I really enjoyed it. And who knows? It might serve her later on in life. Mine served me later on in life.
Absolutely. And that's the thing I never realized. Like things that we thought were, skills that may not be relevant to what we do, 10 years later, it's like, boom, this is the most important part of what I do every day. And we can't really understand how the journey will unfold, but I think following the alignment, all the pieces fall into place to create the most beautiful life experience possible. And I do believe so much in what you said about how if we show up fully, our patients are going to get the best possible care. But for us to show up fully, we need to be rested. We need to be all of who we are. We need to be regulated. We need to be nourished. And I think that message alone is so important for people in our community to hear. But I also love hearing this message of creativity can be tied to your intuition and your ability to show up to the best of your abilities.
Yeah, it's who you are, at your core. And there are people I have who are like, oh, I really struggle with wire skills and hands-on skills. I'm like, have you ever tried to play piano? Like, that's how I built, I have a neuro thing I've talked about on my YouTube before. I don't have the same I'm left-handed, and I don't have the same dexterity on my left hand. Like, I actually cannot feel an 014 wire when I'm holding it. But I have always played piano, and I picked it back up when I started working in the Cath Lab and realizing that was going to be a problem for me. And I was like, okay, let me try to do this a little more, build up my
Ambidextrous, yeah, ambidexterity.
whatever that word is, to use both hands really well. And it significantly helped me. And that's a creative thing. It has nothing to do with what we're doing.
But see, translatable skills, it's like, and I think that's the other trap that we fall into in medicine. We're like, we're really, really, really good at this one thing, but can I do the other things? And the answer is yes, you absolutely can. And there will always be a learning curve. There will always be things that are going to be challenging, but these are very easily translatable skills that we've built over a lifetime. And I think that it kind of comes back to everything that you've mentioned about values, integrity, following your alignment. I do love how you mentioned that, just having a condition or, having certain things that may not be supportive of your presence in the Cath Lab don't hold you back from doing it. And I think each person has their own journey of learning how to be in the lab. And I tell people this all the time, and I heard this my first day in the Cath Lab, like you can teach a monkey how to do a heart cath, right? And the art of what we do is really in being able to tune into that intuition, that inner knowing of when to do something, and even more so when not to do something. When do you stop? And I really trust that that's tied to what you've mastered, which is this ability to move fluidly through life with creativity, with passion, with alignment, without the ego in the way. How do you teach that? Can we teach that? Should we teach that?
Well, I say, so people ask me, like they'll message me about a really bad case, right? And I said, well, did you recognize anything kind of before it got to that point and felt like, is this normal? Should I have said, even if you don't really understand complications, recognize dissections, any of that? And they're like, yeah, well, we did this one thing at this one point. I said, that was your gut check. Like, lean into that for a second, pause for a second, and be like, why am I even questioning what we're doing right now? There's a reason.
We don't talk about that enough.
No, and anytime if I can't speak for how you would feel during a case, but if you look at me and are asking me, do you think we should fix this circ? The answer is probably no. Like, if you're asking me, that's your gut check.
I 100% agree with you.
I'm not going to sit here and convince you otherwise.
And that is one of my favorite parts of that team dynamic, because it's so easy for us to get into our overthinking mind and like override the gut feeling of what's going on.
Logic.
Logic and,
there's something here. I need to fix it.
Yeah.
And that's what you're trying to do.
That's what
you're very good at that.
We're so good at it, but the human existence is not so linear. It's not so textbook. And I think that's the art of working together, of harmonizing in the Cath Lab, of leading on both of our intuitions. Why just mine versus both of ours? We have power together. And I feel like whenever we work well in that way, we make the most
Immaculate?
Um,
Immaculate?
I wanted to say unimaginable and magical at the same time. So I
Magically
guess
unimaginable.
I love that. So like the most magically unimaginable things come to life. Like whenever I see you, I just have all these words that want to come out and I'm just like, I want to tell you everything.
Yeah, yeah. I get it. All at once.
All at once, everything, all my thoughts. But really like that's the synergy. And I think that's actually the holy grail. That's the magic of the work that we do in the Cath Lab.
Yeah, and I need it too, right? Even as a tech, like if I'm rushing because it's all very fluid motion and I'm rushing and I would love for a physician to just go, "Hey, like let's pause for a second." And be like, "Oh,
Can we
thank
do
you."
cases together?
Yeah, right? That'd be great. But that's those are my best mentors that I've had as physicians who have conversation or just open my conversation as like I literally don't care about your choices. I don't care about any of that. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to do the best for the patient. And that's where I'm coming from. And it does come off that way if a physician knows you, and can learn that from you. But it's 99.9% of the time, if you're asking the question or hesitating, there is a reason. Like I even do that when I'm driving. And I know it's very random, but if like we're at a four-way stop and my gut says just let that person go ahead of you, I just let that person go ahead of me. And all the time, like I'm late and you see a car accident happened 5 minutes ahead of you. That could have been you, right? But something came into your life and was like, you know what? We're going to be 5 minutes behind.
You're highly intuitive.
I've learned that.
Yeah.
But you have to like those little
Trust
small
in it.
choices. Yeah. And I still don't always do that sometimes. And then, something happens and I go, "Oh, well, I didn't listen that time," but the little choices that you make every single day, driving with your kids, answering a phone call, ignoring a phone call, like all of those little things are little intuition and gut checks. And then it'll compound over time and you'll feel it a lot better.
So you're the person I wish I knew in my medical training for the reasons of this concept of intuition gut checks. I think this is so valuable to learn as you're learning the process of being a physician or a tech or a nurse at the table, but also because your manuals provide education and access for so many people. How did it feel putting it out there in the world? Because, for me, this creative world is so new. And even just putting out a thought or an idea that feels like a deviation from normal can be really scary. So how did you do that? How did you launch into the world?
Uh Terrified because we don't have anything like that, right? And there are I know a lot of great nursing creators, but it's been something in that space for a while on Etsy of little like great infographics to showcase something. And that's how I always redid my notes and I color coordinate on my notes. And I'm like, if I have to rewrite every textbook, every lecture, there's something wrong with the textbook or the lecture for my way of learning. Not that it's for everybody, right? And not that it's for everybody in every part of their journey, but for someone who literally knows nothing, it took me so long to read through some of our textbooks to just understand the sentence that I was reading. And I felt stupid, and my professors understood it because they're already at that level. And I was like, am I the only one who this takes me like 30 minutes to read these 2 pages and kind of work through them because I want to understand at that level. And I felt like I couldn't get there. I felt like I kept learning and then dumping. And then when I was challenged to come back and teach, you have to know it.
You have to know it so well
And
to
I
be
had
able
to
to teach
relearn
it.
almost all of it. I wasn't a master at hemodynamics. I completely brain dumped all of the cardiomyopathy notes I had. I threw away all of my notes because I was like, I never want to see any of this again. Because in the lab, so much is automated and you don't really think about it until it's a problem. And then my students would ask me these high level questions. And I'm like, I don't know. Haven't thought about it like that way before. Haven't sat here and thought of 7 different ways to explain the same thing because each of you need a different explanation until I was challenged to. So how the books came about, I had somebody I was tutoring to pass the RCIS. And I would draw on Zoom. And she was like, can you just like draw on an iPad? I was like, I didn't even know that's an option. I draw with Sharpie on a piece of paper and I scan it for you. And she was like, you can draw on your iPad. And I said, no, I thought that was just for like comic book illustrators and like big billboard illustrators. And that next day, my husband bought me an iPad and was like, why don't you just try it? 8 hours straight I just drew like everything that I've been trying to draw and just got better and better and better. I was like, oh my gosh, like I just needed the tool, but I didn't know what the tool
Sometimes our
was.
nudges come in the form of little comments. And so that's why I think also being there and like being really present in the moment and really seeing like, what am I here to learn or teach? I think we're constantly in a state of learner, teacher, learner, teacher. And if we're really present in the moment, we'll get what we need to get out of that situation. Nothing is by chance, is what I believe.
And every other book that I've made or things that I've added to the book since I put out my first book had like 92 pages. But I had all the information up here, but I didn't know. I printed them all myself, bound them all myself. I was like, nobody's going to read this. Like, this is for my alumni who kind of want it and these people who are asking me, and that's it. Then when everyone bought it, and then like I'm getting all of this feedback, I was like, wait, this like wasn't a plan. Like this wasn't for everybody. So now I have to think about people who don't speak English are looking at this. And thankfully visuals transcend language, right? And I write things in a certain way where when they're using a translator on their phone, it translates appropriately. You know, I don't use run-on sentences. I don't use super high-level medical terminology, which helps people who are learning for the first time, but also for people who English is not their first language and medical terminology is its own language. But if I can describe what it is and show what it is, they're going to understand, right?
This is such a cool correlate to a lot of things. So education is not one size fits all. Medicine is not one size fits all. Healing as a person is not one size fits all. And you've been able to kind of even the playing field for people.
Unintentionally. It wasn't like I'm so
imagine
glad it's worked out.
if you didn't take that leap of faith in yourself and really take the initiative to follow your inner knowing, because we can all choose to do it or not do it, right? But look at how many people you've impacted and also how many people you've inspired in their own way to go and create. Like you've inspired me to show up here. And this is just one example of thousands, if not more, examples in the world. And that's what I love coming back to. It's this idea that once you show up as your most authentic self, that ripple of what you do for other people, you just never know the extent of it, but it's always there.
No, I don't. I like to be in my little box sometimes because it's a little overwhelming to think about how many people are reading something you wrote or looking at something that you drew. And that is it's very overwhelming for me. Like I taught classes of 11 to 16 people, you know, and even that was nerve-wracking for me sometimes. And I was always like, oh, am I doing enough for them? And if I think about it, like when I wrote the EP one, that was very difficult because that was a whole field I haven't even worked in. I'm having to completely learn it from other people and then translate it into the way that I teach. And I was like, hey, they're either going to hate it or they're going to really like it. It's going to be one of the two. And to think how I want to serve every single person to my fullest capability and make sure they're getting what they need. And to even comprehend to do that of every single person that touches my book is impossible. And it's very overwhelming, you know, but I can do it on one-on-one. If you message me and you go, hey, I didn't really get this. Could you explain it in a different way? I'm like, yes. And that's what I want my book to do is just get the conversation and present it in a way where you start thinking about it at that different level and then ask me. And I can articulate it in a different way, but it's very difficult to curate something that is for everybody. And I knew when I put it out, there were going to be people who it was not for. And they were like, how dare you do this in the medical textbook industry, you know? And I did get that. And that was hard. And I almost was like, okay, I'm just never going to do this again. You know, I'm never going to write another book and I'm just going to, you know.
How did you overcome that?
The people who did reach out, who said, you know, I was failing out of my program. And because at first, a lot of them were where I live. All of my students on average spoke 5 to 6 different languages, you know, each one French, et cetera, et cetera. And I had to learn to teach in that way. So then when someone reached out to me, I thought it was just an Orlando thing. But when someone reached out to me in another country or in California who felt that way and was like, thank you, because I understand this. Like, I understand it's not super high level, but I just needed to understand this so that I could even entertain
the
learning
building
that.
blocks so they can then get to that next point.
Yeah. And
I get
medical's
goosebumps
not like
when you
that.
say that. Yeah.
Like, how many classes have you gone in and they just expect that you already know all of this basic knowledge?
And we don't give people the tools to succeed in the way that they can then continue to build even more in a lot of contexts. And I think it's just because nobody's really questioned, is our normal really normal? And I think it's so important to keep asking that question. I'm also so excited for the people who read your book to know the person behind the manual.
Yeah. I care. I do. Too
I
much sometimes.
I feel like, and that's another really important message. It's like you built this not for the intention of being known, not for the intention of generating a business, but really with the intention of evening the playing field and giving people a resource that will empower them to be the best version of themselves and then ripple that into their community. And because of that, you've become this award-winning entrepreneur and this inspiration to so many of us.
And I don't want to act like I'm not. It's not that I don't want any of those things, right? It just wasn't the initial intention. I'm very grateful for those things that have happened. The only reason I even have the courage to put myself out there and do these things, because it is art. Like, it's my whole of who I am that I am putting into these books, the whole of how I teach into these books. And if it doesn't resonate with someone, that's fine. But for it to impact someone the way that I wish I had and I had to do for myself is why I do it. So I do appreciate you saying that, and I do appreciate that validation, because it's very difficult. And now, as you know, as you're learning, it is a choice every single day to keep showing up, to keep putting stuff out there. People may or may not like it. People may have nice things to say and may not have nice things to say or disagree with you. And none of what I put out is really my opinion, right? I try to present all of the different ways of doing something, all of the different information, and you make your own judgment, based on that. But the internet is the internet, and it's going to do what it's going to do.
It is what it is. And I think
Yeah.
it's so important for us to put out the thing that feels the most aligned and trust that it goes where it needs to go. And
It's too much
you are a
otherwise.
wise teacher in so many different areas. It's Cath Lab, it's EP, but it's also in how to show up in the world fully as yourself without needing the validation of words or actions,
You're not
right?
going to get it.
You're not always going to get what,
Yeah.
get that from the outside. And when you mentioned that example of somebody reaching out to you, I've had people reach out to me now about an episode that they listened to where they've said, hey, I've had a really, really hard day and that episode lifted my spirit. And for me, that's everything. It's like, that is why we do what we do.
And it makes you want to do it again.
It makes you want to show up
Yeah.
again. And I started realizing that there is no act of compassion or kindness that's too small. It's all the same for me, like whether it's a STEMI at 2 a.m. or it's getting a message like that, like, hey, you helped me have a better night's sleep because of the uplifting message that you left in the world. And I'm sure that you feel the same way because you have been in these really extreme situations in the Cath Lab.
Yeah. And there's people who are really amazing and just work in a horrible environment and don't even know it's different elsewhere, who don't have, what nursing has, what some physicians have, what emergency medicine has, and they have these people and these platforms, and they're talking about all the different places they work. And Cath Lab never really had that. Like, you weren't Googling or putting on Instagram like Cath Lab influencer, it wasn't a thing.
I think so. Hashtag Cath Lab is slowly becoming a thing. I think we're
Yeah.
normalizing that.
Yeah, working on it. But they just, like everybody else, you want to see people like you who have a little bit of your background doing different things or doing the thing you're doing and being happy. If you're unhappy and you're like, okay, I can change my situation, I can go to a different lab, it is different elsewhere. And that was a whole other part of it for me, was I didn't realize how many people needed that, of they've only ever worked in that one lab, and they've checked with me and they're like, hey, like, this is my experience. Is this field just not for me? And I'm like, well, it depends. Like, do you enjoy doing it? And it's just your environment is very conflicting. Like, go try a different lab. Who cares? Leave and go over here. You are not going to know unless you go expose yourself to these different things.
And trust
then they're so
yourself,
happy.
trust your inner knowing that it's
Yeah.
time to make a change, that you have to do something differently and question what's normal.
Yeah. Why are you going to completely write off that you're not capable of doing this because of one place's experience? But if you don't even have something to look at or someone to ask, that might be what happens, right? So I've really enjoyed that part of like, yeah, I'm glad you're happy. Or they're like, you know what, I went back to ICU. This wasn't for me, but like, thank you for the conversation. I'm like, that's fine. I want you to make a fully informed, aligned decision. And I'm not saying you can never come back to the Cath Lab. Like, maybe it's just not right now, right? Maybe it's just not, you just had a kid, you want to spend time at home. It's very difficult where you are because you're on call 3 times a week. And if you don't want that for yourself, that's okay. It doesn't mean you're a failure.
It does not diminish your value in this ecosystem. And if anything, it shows the awareness that you have of what kind of rest you need. And in another episode, we talk about different people need different types of rest to show up fully. And I think those themes are so important. And also, it's just like, normalize being a Cath Lab creative, normalize being a whatever you are as a person. I think it's so important and needed in our world. Bringing it back to Cath Lab as we close, I have a couple questions for you. So what's your biggest Cath Lab ick?
I know I thought about this before, and this one I didn't really have an answer to.
If you don't have one, it means you're doing it right. Mine is actually when people don't have the size 5.5 gloves because my hands are small.
Mine too.
Yeah.
I'm actually 5.5, but I always had to wear 6 because
Yeah,
they wouldn't buy
same.
them.
And I didn't realize like it actually helps my dexterity when I wear the smaller gloves. And that's the one thing that people don't realize. Like women makes up such a small percentage of people in the Cath Lab that even the medical devices that we use, the handles are not made to fit our hands. And so I end
I'm
up with
left-handed.
like,
Everything
boy,
is right-handed. Hemostats are right-handed.
yeah.
It's not fun. Did you know they make different size gowns?
Wait, really?
Yes, small, medium, large, XL, and XXL.
I've been wearing a double XL for my entire
That's what
Cath
everybody
Lab
buys.
career.
But I went over to EP because we had 2 of the people who are my cohort actually, who are like 4'9", very small build, and they got them small gowns. I said, wait a second,
I
we have
wonder what that
options?
feels like. Like, does it feel good?
Yeah. Well, because before it was they couldn't
I just called it a ball gown.
they couldn't don themselves without contaminating.
Yeah.
You know, because it was just so there's no way
There's
that
no
you
way.
can do it, and
So
it works really
interesting.
well. Yeah.
But it's a shifting world. I actually did some product demos at a conference recently, and I was just like, this hurts my hand. And they were like, oh, we've never gotten that feedback.
Awesome. Love that for me.
And what is the most magical experience you've ever had in the Cath Lab, or just something that restores your energy, faith, love in what you do?
So besides the on-call STEMIs, I actually had one. It was within my first month of working where I was kind of questioning, did I make the right choice? Right? Like, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? There was a motor vehicle accident patient, FIFA arrest, but they have to come in because that's what we do, tie troponins, whatever. So, but he became paraplegic from his accident. My mom's a paraplegic, so he became paraplegic. He came in, but I research my patients. That's what I do. Not everybody does, but I go into that because I want to know like what happened, why they're here, how's their stay been, like what mental space are they coming in with, and the nurse in the room didn't look up the patient and asked him to transfer to the table. And mind you, this just happened like 2 days ago to him. And he just started crying. And I was like, can you leave the room? Like, I want to talk to him. And I said, I read what happened. I just want you to know I'm going to cry. I was like,
Yeah.
I said, look, my mom's a paraplegic and she's amazing and independent. And I know this is devastating. And I said, she was the same age when this happened to her. And I just walked him through that. And the case was fine, negative. But I was like, what are the chances of that in my room on the day that I'm working? And I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do.
I will tell you, there are no such thing as coincidences, and you were meant to be part of that person's journey, and they're so lucky to have you there.
And I needed that. Like, I needed that. I think he needed that. I don't know what happened to him. I hope he's doing fine if he watches this. But he probably got Versed in fentanyl. He probably doesn't even remember.
What an important reminder for us that when we show up, we can be fully present and be that person who's there with that patient and really make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's coming in like super excited to have their heart cath.
No, nobody wants to be there. It's
No,
it's
they
not
don't.
it's
And they're
not a fun
scared.
place for people to come, and it's scary. And I think also as the person on the other side of it, we have so much to gain from having the privilege of connecting with a person in this way. They tell
They're
you
a human
things.
being.
They're a human being.
Yeah.
They tell you things that are just like never shared before, and it's incredible to build that relationship with people.
Yeah, and that was my moment. Yeah, I've never had a moment like it since then, but I don't think I have needed another one. Like I will never forget that from 10 years ago, but I needed that and he needed that, and it was a good teaching moment too.
Thank you for
everybody in
sharing
the room.
that.
Oh,
It
you're
really
welcome.
it means so much hearing your story. And
I've told my students that before, but I remember I was broken and I didn't cry before. And now I'm just like a water fountain.
you know what? Our next episode is going to be about that, because I think actually what you do is extremely healthy and needed in our world. Like normalize showing that we're people, showing emotion, how to process emotion. I feel like you've kind of summarized the entire purpose of our podcast, Open Heart. But I do
Are
have
you
to
trying
ask
to do
you,
this to me? You're trying to break me. You've succeeded.
we're breaking open. I think that's an important part of the shift that we're experiencing in medical culture. We're breaking our hearts open and showing up more fully. But what does living with an open heart mean to you?
Definitely a lot of the intuition, and it's served me well in my life. So I'm trying to tune into it a little more, of not immediately saying no when something is scary or just seems difficult. Just being like, you know what, I'll think about that and I'll get back to you, to myself, to the universe. I'll think about that, but not right now, but I'll entertain it and just kind of see where it leads. And I think it's more of that, more saying yes, of more trying things. And if if it doesn't work out, like, you tried it, versus never knowing. And that's, to me, is leading with an open heart personally. And then professionally, I'm very quick to not immediately answer people's questions who DM me. I ask more questions of, tell me about where you work. How's your onboarding experience been? Like, what are they coming to me with besides just their one single question? And I learn so much that way. And I think they learn a lot about themselves through that way too, of me challenging them to be like, so tell me about yourself. Like, how's your work culture? Are you happy? Do you have kids? Like, what does that look like for you? So I'm trying to do that in both aspects, business and personally.
I'm so inspired by how you live with so much openness, and I'm so
glad it seems that
grateful.
way.
You're a wise friend and a wise teacher to all of us, and we're grateful to have you on Open Heart. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
What I love most about Sam's story is that she didn't wait for permission. She trusted her own inner knowing, and you may notice we keep returning to this theme: deep self-trust, intuition. In an ecosystem that often measures worth by titles or hierarchy, she recognized her value not only as a Cath Lab technologist, but as a creator, educator, and a force for positive change. She listened to her intuition, followed what felt true, and reminded us that we are all part of this interconnected web of healing, where every voice, every role, and every act of courage matters. If this conversation inspired you, share it with someone who's ready to remember their own personal power and use it in ways that benefit all of humanity. Until next time, may you trust your own inner knowing and never miss a beat. This is Priya Rao, signing off.